All right, good morning, everybody. So much to unpack here. This is sort of a response to Sean Zeitel. And again, this is not me taking a shot against him, but just want to talk about some of the points he made in his video, right? And, you know, we always seem to find ourselves back to this place when it comes to boxing, right? When we try to find a semblance of moral relevancy in a sport, with all due respect, that really doesn't have any. And it sounds crazy because this is the sport that I love. I followed since I was a young boy. I've been watching boxing since 1978. I'm 56 right now, so you can do the math. Now, obviously, I wasn't well versed in the sport in my earlier years, and I grew to understand it and learn more about it as I got older. But anytime we try to get in these types of discussions, what they end up devolving into is a never ending cascade of whataboutisms, right? Because nobody has clean hands here, right? We can go back and look at so much of the evils of the sport of boxing, and it's spread out among a lot of people, not just one. So every time the spotlight gets shifted to one person, I just find it ironic. And then you have no choice but to point out the hypocrisies because there's so many people to blame for what's wrong with this sport. And then when we try to pin it all on one person, and then we make these statements like, okay, well, if this person's allowed to do this, if this person does that, then it's the end of the sport. And I go back to 2015, right, with the PBC, because all of the same things I'm hearing now, I heard back in 2015, and I wasn't worried because here's the thing: there's 20,000 registered boxers around the world today. Okay, so the notion that one group, one company, one entity is going to be able to control the sport and monopolize it, I find it ridiculous. I don't know how else to say it. And I'll say the same thing, and I hate to beat a dead horse. I'll say the same thing I said back in 2015, and I'm going to repeat it now. You know, if you don't like somebody, right, or you don't think that what they're doing is good, then outperform them, outpromote them, beat them by putting on a better product. This whole boycott thing and this we're going to get rid of you and we don't want you to be able to operate in our holier than thou sport, right? It's ridiculous, right? It's ridiculous. And I just want to kind of make some counterpoints to some of the things that Sean was talking about because he keeps talking about this antitrust lawsuit with the UFC, right? And again, this is going to be a stain forever, right? And I keep repeating this, and whether or not anyone wants to give it any credence, but you're talking about issues that happened 10 years ago, and now these lawsuits are coming up. There's another one that's coming up. I think it was from 2021, but all of these lawsuits are stemming from when the Fertitta brothers owned and run the UFC. And once again, it's not the same company today as it was then. Purchased them in 2023. They went public, and then they merged with WWE, I believe, in 2024. And then they're under the banner of TKO, which is another publicly traded company. So what happened 10, 15 years ago I just don't think it's going to happen today because they're under the spotlight now. Once you're a publicly traded company, you cannot operate the same way as when you were a private company, right? And they've already paid out a settlement. So do you think they want to go through that again and make the same mistakes twice? So don't you think they're probably going to dot their I's and cross their T's now? And there's so much more money involved now. So obviously, right, the stakes are going to be higher now for the fighters. They're going to get paid more, right? And we can go through this whole fighter pay thing. I believe Sean said that boxers take home 50% of the revenue or 60% of the revenue, but it's just not the case. That's the top of the top who take that home. When you look at the undercard fighters, they're taking 5% home. All you got to do is look at the purses. Like when you see Floyd Mayweather was making 40 million a fight, 50 million a fight, and his opponent was making a million, million and a half, maybe two or three. That opponent is not taking 60% of the revenue. So only the top people are taking that 50, 60%. You could do the math, you could do the research yourself. It's not hard to figure out, right? So if you don't like TKO and you haven't even seen them in action yet, everything is based off of sentiment, right? It's based off of what you think they're going to do. Oh well, they have this antitrust lawsuit from stemming from 10 years ago, 15 years ago, whatever the case may be, and now all of a sudden, oh, history is going to repeat itself. Okay, so by that logic, right? By that logic, the WBC was sued for $30 million back in 2002, I believe, or 2002, 2003, by Gianfranco Raccacciani, right? And they were on the verge of going bankrupt, right? They weren't going to be able to pay that out. I mean, $30 million back then is about close to $60 million today, $58 million today, right? And that's only with one fighter. And they never paid out that lawsuit because they didn't have the ability to do so. And this was all about rankings. And today they still manipulate rankings, right? They still play games and show favoritism towards other fighters. So again, this whole thing about fighter pay, right? When you charge exorbitant amounts of money for sanctioning fees, right? And all you're doing is providing a belt. You bring nothing else to the table. You're ranking fighters, and you're doing it selectively through favoritism, and you're ordering specific fights through favoritism. You're ranking certain guys through favoritism and politics. You're ordering mandatories immediately for some fighters. You're stripping some fighters quickly and expeditiously, while others are allowed to not have to fight mandatories. They're not. They could be inactive for years, and you won't strip them. So again, like whenever you do this to a fighter, whenever a fighter like Dillian White, right, or even David Benavidez to some degree, is the mandatory challenger, and you don't allow that person to fight the top guy, right, the money guy, and you make them wait, 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 and you keep stringing them along, you're taking food off the guy's table. So if you're about fighter pay, that affects fighter pay too. So let's not just point to one group here because there's enough blame and criticism to go around in boxing, right? So Sean loves to bring up this antitrust lawsuit with the WBC, excuse me, with the UFC. let's park the WBC for a second here, and let's focus on the UFC, which is what Sean likes to talk about all the time. So he loves to point out to that lawsuit, but once again, there's been many lawsuits in the sport of boxing, right? And have we ever seen a payout of such a high amount that we did with the UFC? And this is without the Muhammad Ali Act. So once again, legislation is legislation. Rules are rules, right? So if you want to go to court, you don't need to invoke the Muhammad Ali Act to sue somebody. So contract law is always going to be contract law, right? So it is what it is. So he loves to talk about that lawsuit, the antitrust lawsuit. So let's he was sitting there saying that like Amazon is is the saving grace here because of the market cap value of Amazon. But if you put it in context, Prime Video is a subsidiary of Amazon. Amazon is a e-commerce company, right? And that's basically where they get all their revenue from, right? They're an e-commerce company, and Prime Video is a subsidiary. So you don't compare Netflix and you don't compare all these other platforms to the company Amazon itself. You compare it to Prime Video, right? But he wants to talk about antitrust, so let's take a look at antitrust. Here it is. Look at this. So they are paying out 2.5 billion in an antitrust lawsuit. Amazon is, right? If you look at it. So again, you'd like to talk about the antitrust lawsuits with the UFC, but what about Amazon? You're talking about Amazon like like they have the moral high ground here. They're going to be the saving grace of it all, and you're so critical of a company paying out an antitrust lawsuit. What about Amazon? You fail to mention you know their antitrust lawsuit or multi antitrust lawsuits, right? You fail to mention that, right? And let's take a look. Like all you gotta do is go on the internet. Let's pull it all up here if I can find it because I have a lot of information just as he did, and I'm gonna have to navigate my way through all this too. So let's take a look. You could scour the internet. It's not hard to find. Look at this: Amazon refunds. They're required to pay 1.5 billion for refunds to customers affected by its unlawful. This is from the Federal Trade Commission here, from its unlawful practices here. Look at this: Amazon Prime 2.5 billion settlement. Amazon refunds underway 2.5 FTC settlement. Right? Amazon settles lawsuit over Prime subscriptions. Look at it. All these websites. Like look at it. So again, whenever you want to play this game of moral relevancy, you end up you end up opening yourself up to this never-ending cascade of whataboutisms because everyone has dirty hands here, right? Everyone has dirty hands here. You want to talk about ethics, you want to talk about morals, you want to talk about standards, this and that, but you fail to mention some of these other things that are out there already that have gone on in boxing. Bob Arum, or not even Bob Arum directly, but Top Rank, bribed the IBF for rankings. Admitted to it. Top Rank admitted to it in court, right? They were they were bribing the IBF for rankings, right? WBC. They were sued for 30 million back in 2002, I believe it was, on the verge of bankruptcy, right? You got Bob Arum and Don King. You want to bring up, the human rights thing with Saudi Arabia? Okay, so what about Bob Arum and Don King during the apartheid days in South Africa? They were still putting on shows in South Africa during the apartheid days. So again, we could play this game. Like we could go and look at any country and look at the history and pull up the evils and the ills of any country, right? But do you really want to play that game? Do you really want to open yourself up to this never ending cascade of whataboutisms, right? Because where are we going to end up? where are we going to end up, right? And then the whole thing, right? Let's this another issue about the whole thing about the belt. They want their own belt. Once again, you know, PBC wanted to do the same thing, right? Let's play it right here. This is from Bill Wagner of Fox Sports when he was being interviewed by Chris Mannix. Let's play it.
PBC, and we're on our way to do this. And as things fall into place, we are going to have a PBC belt and a PBC champion, let's say, of the heavyweight
so,
division. So play this out.
so
Andy
where
Ruiz
was Sean
beats Anthony
Zeitel
Joshua again,
during
and
this
eventually you
time
have
period, right? Where was Sean Zeitel during this period, right? So again, like the hypocrisy is off the charts here. And then he's talking about, oh well, you have Nick Khan saying and Dana White saying that no other promoter has an American broadcast deal, and he points to Amazon Prime. All right, let's look at Amazon Prime. Okay, let's look at the schedule here. If I could find this, yeah, here's a PBC schedule. All the fights that transpired this year that went on, and let's take a look at this. Let's take a look at this schedule, right? So you had one. Let's count them. I'm sorry. Let's start from the top. One, two, three, four, five, six. You had 7 fights this year on PBC, Amazon Prime, right? Amazon Prime Video, right? And of these 7 fights, 4 of them were on pay per view, right? So you're talking about this rights deal that PBC has with Amazon Prime. Okay, if there's such a big deal, right, then why are 60% of the events on pay per view? Why wouldn't the rights fee be high enough to cover the purses for these events if this is such a great deal? You have to ask yourself that. Isaac Cruz versus Lamont Roach, good fight, not pay per view quality. Manny Pacquiao versus Mario Barrios. Well, okay, it's Manny Pacquiao, but again, still Mario Barrios with all due respect. A Caleb Plant, this fight was not pay per view. The Tim Tszyu fight was not pay per view. The Sebastian Fondor fight was not pay per view. But this Gervonta Davis versus Lamont Roach was pay per view. That's not pay per view quality to me. David Benavidez versus David Morrell Jr., another pay per view. So once again, you talk about how great Amazon Prime is, and they're going to be the saving grace, and they have all this money. So if they have all this money, then why doesn't the rights fee cover the purses, and 60% of the fights have to be on pay per view in order to pay the fighters, right? You want to compare them to Netflix. When Netflix does a show, they are not they're not challenge they're not excuse me they're not charging a pay per view fee, right? So let's take a look at the top streaming services, right, in the world here. Let's take a look because you want to compare Amazon to Netflix and some of the others, right? So let's take a look. All right, so you have Netflix at number one, 301,630,000. You got Amazon Prime, 200,000. Excuse me, yeah, 200 million. Excuse me. Disney Plus, 131. So I mean, where's you got ESPN at number 15, right? You got DAZN at number 16, right? And DAZN has 20 million subscribers globally, right? So out of all of these streaming platforms that broadcast sports, DAZN is last, right? They're at the bottom. And again, the 16 is not a bad spot to be. 20 million subscribers globally is great, but how many of them are in the United States? On ESPN, this is just ESPN Plus. This isn't the terrestrial network. Okay, so when if you have a deal with ESPN, you don't only have to rely on these ESPN Plus subscribers. You get the people who are watching the terrestrial cable as well, where it comes with their standard package if you get standard cable. All right, so you got Paramount Plus at number 8 here. All right, they have 79 million, and once again, they're not going to be charging pay per view. We're going to pay the subscription price, and you're going to be getting these events uh, without having to pay a pay per view cost. So again, Netflix are when you have a company like Netflix who are doing the biggest events in boxing, and you got Amazon Prime who has all this supposed revenue, or these for the 200 million subscribers, which is nothing to sneeze at. So if you have all these subscribers, you have all these subscription fees, then why are you still charging pay per view for events, right? Why are you still charging a pay per view price for over 60% of your events? So you have to ask yourself that, right? So if we're gonna get into this battle of morality, and we're gonna talk about ethics and all this stuff, we have to look at the history. We really have to look at the history, right? Who has the moral high ground? Does anyone really have the moral high ground here? Then he talks about how all these promoters are supposed to band against TKO. How are they going to do that when they're taking money from the same guy or the same fund? They're all taking money from the Saudi investment fund, right? The PIF, right? They're all taking money from that. So these guys are going to bite the hand that feeds. They're going to sit there and say, "Oh, okay, well, we're going to like Turkey Al Sheikh is funding everyone, and he's behind this project with TKO." So, again, I hate to keep beating the dead horse, but you sat there and you were trying to like lambast Dana White at that Terrence Crawford Canelo Alvarez broadcast, but without that man sitting to the right of him, right? Without that man sitting to the right of him, right? Turkey Al Sheikh, TKO doesn't get off the ground because Dana White is not using any of none of his money. So the same people that are yelling about TKO that is being funded by Turkey Al Sheikh, or not directly, but by the private investment fund of Saudi Arabia, right? PIF, right? They have nothing to say to him though, right? They have nothing to say to him. Public investment fund, not private investment fund. Sorry about that. So again, you have no problem taking money from the public investment fund, right? And you want to criticize Dana White, but don't criticize Dana White. Criticize the guy who's actually funding his project, Sella, the Saudi company, through the public investment fund. And then people want to say, "Oh, well," and Sean said this, "Well, how much are they going to want to waste money and lose money?" Well, again, like boxing broadcasters lose money on boxing all the time. Boxing for a lot of these broadcasters is filler content, right? And they try to recoup their money when the big shows come about. So a lot of boxing shows don't make money for these broadcasters, right? And if you look at the public investment fund, only 1.7% of it, right, is allocated towards sports and entertainment. So again, like in this fund, this public investment fund is worth close to $1 trillion, right? And it's targeted to exceed over 2 trillion or 2.5 trillion by 2030. So again, this isn't going to stop. So this whole thing, like all these promoters are going to band against TKO. Why? How? If they're all depending on the same money source, what are they going to do? What are they going to do? You're going to bite the hand that feeds, right? So again, let the market decide who wins and who loses. It's that simple. You want to talk about monopolies? There are no monopolies here. Okay, it's called a monopsony. You know what a monopsony is? When you have one buyer. We have plenty of sellers out there, but most of the buyers are buying one product, which is that decision. And by trying to shame them, by bringing politics and all this historical content into it, okay, so then now all the whataboutisms are going to come back to you. What about this, Sean? What about that? You want to talk about class action lawsuits? Look at all the class action lawsuits Amazon has going against it. Listen, I'm a pro worker guy, bro. I'm in a union. I'm a card carrying union member. I'm pro worker, right? But I know how the game is played. I'm a realist. It's okay to have an ideology, and ideology is fine. Like we all have ideologies, but ideology is what you believe something should be, or how something should be, right? Or how you want something to be. But the reality of life is not everything is roses, right? You're going to deal with political influence, right? You're going to deal with quid pro quo. Powerful people are going to have influence, and they are going to sway big companies. The first thing a big company does when it comes into a city or a state, first place they go is they talk to the politicians, right? And I got to be careful here because I'm a municipal worker. I don't want to get too deep into this and get myself in trouble. But some of the things and again, this is on a lower level, but some of the things I see, some of the things I've learned in my career about these companies and these politicians, right? You know, once you know how the game is played, and probably most of you do, or you do and you just don't want to focus on it. But again, all these people are the same: Democrats, Republicans, big business. They all work hand in hand behind the scenes. It's like the WWE. You have the heels and you have the faces, right? But then once the match is over, everybody's friends. That's pretty much how politics works. That's pretty much how big business works. They all work hand in hand. So you want to play this game of ethics and morality and all the, as Ring IQ likes to say, you want to be Sally Struthers, then again, you're going to have to it's a never ending barrage, cascade, or however you want to frame it. It's the never ending uh, avalanche of fucking whataboutisms. Okay? That's why I'm like, I separate business. I separate business from politics, business from ethics, morality, whatever. Of course, certain things. Everyone looks at certain things differently. Of course, everyone has a point where they won't go below. But just because you're not taking money from the Saudis, I mean, you are taking money from the sport of boxing that is marred with controversy, that is marred with corruption. So you're already working in an industry that has no ethics, that has no morals, that has no fairness, right? That's what you're dealing with. So if you want to sit there and look for the high ground, you're not going to find it here. You're not. There is none. There's no high ground here. There's not. So, like, I could have put Sean Zeitel's name in the title and tried to get some clickbait off of Sean Zeitel, right? But I didn't do that. I'm just trying to make some logical counter arguments to what he's saying, and he has this vision, and he has a right to have this vision. He has a right to believe what he wants to believe. But anyone that covers this sport, right? Anyone talks about this sport. I make a little money on this sport, but a pittance, okay? A pittance. And I've been talking about this sport, doing videos for years. I'm a nobody. I'm an insignificant voice in the grand scheme of things. But anyone who partakes in this, we're all part. To quote to quote Michael Corleone in The Godfather, right? We're all part of the same hypocrisy here, all of us, right? So and to try to deny that, it's we can't deny that we're all part of the same hypocrisy, right? We all cover a sport that is marred with controversy, that is unfair, and it's always going to be about the money, okay? And unfortunately, unfortunately, the fighters are secondary. Whether these guys want to admit it or not, the fighters are secondary, okay? They're secondary, right? They just are. The sanctioning bodies had their chance. These promoters had their chance, right? They can't sit there and say that this organization is going to be worse than what they are. Here's the thing, man. I just keep score. That's what I do. Okay? Everyone thinks I'm biased towards Dana White because Dana White's from Boston and I'm from Boston. We have this sort of I have this sort of affinity towards Dana White. No, I just respect good businessmen. I respect people who come from nothing and become something, right? And looking at where Dana White started and where he ended up today, here's the thing, guys. Dana, and I don't say this disparagingly. Dana White's an employee. He works for the Fertitta brothers, right? And then when the Fertitta brothers sold to Endeavor, he worked for Endeavor, right? And now he works for TKO. At any time, any of these companies could have fired him. You have to ask yourself one question, right? Because again, usually when there's when a company sells to another entity, or there's a merger, they usually clean house. Everyone gets wiped out and they start from scratch. Not all the time, but a lot of times. But you have to ask yourself, why does this guy keep hanging around? What is it about this guy that people want him to represent their brand, right? I mean, they're paying this guy like he just signed another 5-year extension through TKO, right? Why? Why do they let this, if this guy is so bad and he sucks and he's not good at his job, and like why would they keep him around? Why wouldn't they just replace him? Right? Why wouldn't they replace him? You know? So I just respect people who are successful and are good at what they do. And you know, even Elon Musk, I'm not a huge fan of him because I kind of don't like some of his positions on things, right? But gotta respect the guy's hustle. But I respect a guy like Dana even more because the guy came from South Boston, right? Which isn't a it's not it's not fucking Beverly Hills. If you know what South Boston, it's not Beverly Hills with all due respect. And that whole Whitey Bulger story, from what I understand, and he's confirmed it himself, it's true. He ran into some of the wrong people, and he ended up leaving Boston as a result of it. From what I understand, that's true, right? Thank you, Alexander Wilson. He says for the $5 super chat. Says the craziest thing is that this spurred from TKO buying and investing in USA Nationals, which somehow is a bad thing. The amateur scene has no visibility. Again, I'm not going to speak to that, and I'm not going to get involved in what Jean. And again, I respect Sean Zeitel. So accusing him of just putting information out there and not doing the proper research. I'm not going to attack his journalism. I used to work with him. Again, we never had a direct interaction. I'm not going to sit there and say we were friends. But when I was at the Boxing Voice, he was doing a lot of videos, and I was editing the website at the time, and I would take his videos and I would transcribe his videos into interviews. Right? That's what I would do, or I would assign it to other writers to do it. And sometimes I would do it. Sometimes I would assign it to other writers. Right? And one thing I, I respect people who work hard. This is another guy who he started in the Boxing Voice, then he went over to Fight Hype, and now he's on his own. I'm not going to knock the guy's hustle. I don't subtract from others to add to myself. The guy made a name for himself, right? So I'm not taking away from that. Doesn't mean I have to agree with everything he says, right? Doesn't mean I have to agree with everything he says. That's all right. You know, and one thing I can see about the guy is, in my opinion, and again, this is just my opinion, he bases a lot of his opinions off of ideology, right? And again, ideology is great. We all have it. Everyone says to themselves, no one should starve in this world. Everyone should have healthcare in this world, right? These are common positions that most people would have, right? But that's the ideology. Now, the politics of it all is, how do we get there? What's the reality of the situation? Can everybody have health care? Right? Can everybody succeed? Can everyone eat? Can we eliminate all of the bad things in the world 100%? Or should we just focus on doing the best we can and trying to help the most amount of people possible, and stop always looking to that group, however big or small it is, that are not succeeding? Doesn't mean we can't try to help them, but I don't believe we should throw out the baby with the bathwater. I've never believed that, right? Never believed that. So if TKO was so bad, then I'm going to say the same thing I said back in 2015 when I thought when Bob Arum and Oscar De La Hoya were sued the PBC. If you don't like what they're doing, then outperform them. You were the guys that refused to work with each other. Every promoter, every company wants to be number one, and it's a competition. I hate to bring it to this because I know this is a sensitive topic, because we always talk about this thing, toxic masculinity, and what is a man, and what does it mean to be a man, and what do you have to do to be a man, and what are masculine traits. But one of the masculine traits in a man is competition, right? Since the beginning of time, we've always had to compete, whether it be for resources, food, shelter, right? For women, right? In a society, women are drawn to the strongest males, right? Ones who can protect them and provide for them. That's in any species. That's what the female species looks for in the male species. So it's competition. So I believe that. Now, doesn't mean the rules shouldn't be fair, right? Does it mean we should get there through exploitation, right? But again, of course, when people are in a powerful, anyone that has leverage, you have to learn this in life. Once you learn this in life, life becomes easier. Anyone that has leverage and power, they're going to use it, and they're not going to give it up willingly, right? So you can choose to either work with that person or group or entity, or you want to go head to head with them. If you think you could win, then have at it. If you can't win, you got to find common ground somewhere, right? And I try to find common ground in the sport of boxing. I try to look to the good things. I try to look to the good things. I look for the great events, the great fighters, the history, um, the dedication, the discipline, the heart. I look at the good things. I try to. I try to park the business side to the side. I know it's there. I know it's there. I acknowledge it. I don't ignore it, but I try not to focus on it. So once you start focusing on all of the politics, the morality, the negativity, and all of the evil, right? Once you put that to the forefront, you're taking away from all of the beauty, right? I'm gonna judge TKO on their product, just like I would do anything else. And I believe in the guardrails we have in government. Now, are they perfect? No. But nobody, we do have antitrust laws in this company, right? We do have laws that every business has to follow. We do have those laws. And just because someone is using their political influence, again, he brought up Jeff Bezos, Sean Zeitel. You know how many times Jeff Bezos has been to the White House this year, had meetings with Donald Trump? It's okay. He donated money to the guy's inauguration. He didn't endorse anybody in the 2024 election because this guy was waiting at the end of the finish line to see who was going to be the winner. He didn't care who won. Jeff Bezos is going to do business with anybody. He's a smart guy. He knows whoever I got to deal with, I'm going to deal with. I don't care who it is. I'm going to deal with that person, and I'm going to figure it out. Right? So this notion that Jeff Bezos has chosen a side, Sean, you're wrong. Again, they're all the same behind closed doors. They all hang out together. They all eat dinners together. They all take meetings together. And what they say about each other in public, they're not saying the same thing behind closed doors. Trust me. Trust me. I know firsthand. Right? This isn't me trying to pull rank or be condescending to anyone, but I'm just telling you. So, I mean, that's all. That's all. I mean, what else can I say? It is what it is, right? It is what it is. You know, we're in a sport that doesn't have clean hands, and you have all these promoters taking money from the same guy who was funding TKO, and then you want to sit there and talk shit about TKO. You don't see the irony in that. You don't see the hypocrisy in that. So do they really care about morals and ethics? When you have promoters during the apartheid days who were still putting on events in South Africa, did they really care about civil rights if you're doing that? Right? Do they really care about that? Some of our greatest allies tried to do the most horrible things to us. And again, I hate doing this. I just really hate doing this because because it just never ends, right? Has there ever been a more conquering nation in the history of the world than Great Britain? The War of 1812, right? Go back to the Revolutionary War. If they had it their way, we wouldn't even exist. And we could talk about Germany, could talk about Mao Zedong in China. Who's killed more of their own people than this man? And they put this guy on their own currency. And then most of you guys are using and typing your tweets on an iPhone that was more than likely built in China. So where does this moral relevancy end with you guys? Are you going to sit there and go in your house and stop throwing everything that has a made in China sign on it in the trash? What are we doing here? Where does it begin and where does it end? See, that's why I just like it is what it is what it is. You have your own positions, and if you want to take a holier than thou stance, then just be prepared to open yourself up to a never-ending barrage and cascade of whataboutisms. Because if you want to dig down deep, you can find a lot of horrible things about every country in this globe, or on this globe, I should say. Where does it ever end? Where does it ever end? That's all I'm saying. It's not personal, but you have to understand. And again, I'm 50. I just turned 56 December 9th, right? And I've had, I've just changed over the years. You just look at things and you see how the world is, and you learn how to pick and choose your battles, right? And this battle or this quest or however you want to frame it, right? This journey of searching for moral relevancy in the sport of boxing is a never ending bottomless pit. You're never going to find it. You're on a road to nowhere. Okay? The promoters already showed you who they are. They told you who they are. You have a guy like Eddie Hearn, right? Who on camera told you, Turki Al Sheikh is my boss. I would be prepared to shine his shoes. That's a man telling another man that I'm willing to shine your shoes. On camera, said that. And the internet is forever. That could be pulled up and played back to him over and over again. Right? He said that. And then he's trying to, if you watch a documentary on Netflix, he's trying to sell his company to Turki Al Sheikh. So Sean, you're mad about TKO and you're concerned about them taking over. This guy openly said he wants to sell his company to Turki Al Sheikh. So apparently he has no problem with putting boxing in Turki Al Sheikh's hands. Right? So we're all products. We're all products, to quote the great Don Corleone, Michael Corleone. We're all products of our own hypocrisy. We're all products of our own hypocrisy. All of us. All of us. So when you want to try to take the moral high ground, there is none. There is none. You want to talk about human rights? The same people who you're supporting bribe the sanctioning body. When you bribe a sanctioning body and you put certain fighters ahead of other fighters, you're taking money out of their pockets, food off their table, to the ones who actually earn the rankings. And you're putting your own people in front. So you can't be an advocate and a champion for fighter pay and not criticize that. Now, I'm past it. It happened, whatever. Right? It happened. But if you don't want to move on and you want to focus on the antitrust lawsuit, fine. Fine, that's great. I'm not here to cape for the UFC. That's a stain forever. Anytime that's brought up, they can't explain it away. They can't explain it away. They can't explain it away. They're going to have to address it all the time. They're going to have to address it all the time. You know? Just like the WBC is going to have to address their issues. Just like any sanctioning body. The IBF, they took bribes. That's in their history. They took bribes from a promoter in order to rank that promoter's fighters. They did it. They did it. So your history is what your history is. When does the statute of limitations end on your history? Right? Where does it end? Where does it end? And if you're concerned about TKO having its old belt, I just played you a video where PBC said they wanted their own belt. Don't you remember? I don't know if you guys are old enough to remember. ESPN used to have an ESPN belt, right? These tournaments have trophies. Like, again, like, who cares? Does it really matter? I don't know. For me, this is just for me. I've been watching boxing. Again, this is not a flex, but this is just an explanation of why I believe what I believe. I remember when Larry Holmes was the WBC champion in an 85, right? He said, fuck the WBC because they wanted him to fight. I forget who they wanted him to fight, but he said no, right? And they ended up becoming the IBF champion. And that's when the IBF first came about in around 1984-ish, 1985-ish. But Larry Holmes was the one responsible for making the IBF famous. So I remember that, and that sticks in my mind. And that's why I have the logic that I have. Because I remember back then when the fighter was the one that made the belt and not the other way around. Because without the fighters, the sanctioning body doesn't exist. You need the fighters to be famous in order and represent you in order for your sanctioning body to have credibility and get respect. So nobody cared back then that Larry Holmes ditched the WBC belt and became the IBF champion. Nobody cared. Nobody cared because Larry Holmes, in everyone's mind, was the true champion, was the lineal champion. He was the guy that everyone respected. No one said, okay, we're not going to get behind this guy anymore because he ditched the WBC belt. So this is why I've always had the mentality that the fighter makes the belt, not the other way around. Now again, the belts are important to some fighters, but it's all up to the broadcaster. The broadcaster is gonna look at a fight from a revenue generating standpoint. They're not going to say, "Oh, we're not going to put this fight on if it's not for a title," right? They're not going to say that. The belts have been used to manipulate the fighters. For instance, from what I've heard, this is what I heard, and I'm not saying it's 100% accurate. O'Shaquie Foster was going to pull out of the fight with Stephen Fulton. Okay? And he wanted more money than what they offered. They were going to give him more. They were going to give him a little bit more money, but he wanted more than what they offered. So from what I heard, this is what was reported, I believe, by Dan Rafael. Again, I don't know how true this is, but he said that in order to sweeten the pot, PBC went to the WBC and asked them to put the interim title on the line in order to convince him to not pull out of the fight. Right? And that's why he didn't pull out of the fight. That's the story I heard. I don't know how true it is. That's the story I heard. But even if that were to be true, so a promoter went to the sanctioning body and asked them to put a title on the line, and the sanctioning body just listened to the promoter and said, "Okay, we'll put it on because you want it." So instead of just putting a title belt on the line based off of merit, they did it as a favor to the promoter. So again, is that, in your opinion, objectively speaking, is that ethical? That a promoter can go to a sanctioning body and ask them to put a title belt on the line for a guy who's not even ranked and never fought at that, who never fought at the weight class. So again, this is why you can cape if you want to support these sanctioning bodies, it's up to you. But you're talking to a guy who's coming from an era, and for a long period of time, it's always been this way. Up until only recently, some people disagree with it, but it's always been the fighter making the belt and not the belt making the fighter for the most part, right? If you were a sanctioning body, it was an honor, privilege, and a sense of pride to have the best fighter in the division represent you, right? That's what it was about. And sometimes sanctioning bodies, particularly the WBC, they have this sense of arrogance about them where they think they're bigger than the fighter. They think they're bigger than boxing. I don't know. Has history panned out that way? All right. That's what you have to ask yourself. That's what you have to ask yourself. So this is the thing. Mayweather was the best fighter of his generation. This guy was a great, great fighter. I'm not a big fan of him as a person, but I will never take away from him as a fighter. People can talk about he didn't fight this guy, he waited this. Again, you got to understand this guy was still dominating the sport at 37 years old, 38 years old, close to 40. Still not, he was still the best fighter in boxing. Oh, well, he waited till Pacquiao wasn't in his prime. Yeah, he was 3 years older than Pacquiao. That's great. But what Mayweather did is he left a lot of what we see today. It's a creation of him. These are all Mayweather. These were all Mayweather constructs, right? These were all Mayweather constructs, right? You had to be undefeated. Oh, I'm a Showtime fighter. You want to fight me? You have to come on Showtime. I don't fight people on the other side of this. Like all this stuff, other side of the street. Oh, I'm robbing the bank. He used to brag about making lots of money fighting lesser opposition. But again, he did earn his position because early on he did fight the top guys, and he earned that position. But what he did was he created this environment and a lot of these constructs that we see today, a lot of these idioms, a lot of these unwritten rules. And he was the guy that would always say and show off the WBC belt, right? So that was their marketing tool back then. Mayweather was their marketing tool. So he was the guy that was saying how great the WBC was, the WBC this, WBC that. This is my favorite belt. This is the only blah 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 blah. So everyone just ran with it, right? So for me, it was all like this whole thing about how the WBC being better than everyone else. It's just marketing because they're not really doing anything that the other sanctioning bodies aren't doing. What are they doing that's so special? That's different than the other sanctioning bodies. So this whole thing about the WBC being the most favorable, most prestigious belt is a Mayweather construct, right? And again, like we'll see how like boxing is very cyclical, right? It goes through cycles, goes through periods. Like there's times when when HBO and Showtime would not mention the sanctioning bodies. You had a time when the PBC wouldn't even recognize WBO champions, right? During that PBC broadcast with Stephen Fulton and Shock Foster, right? They didn't even recognize that fight as a title fight. So again, like if you wanna fall for the marketing scheme of Floyd Mayweather, and you wanna adopt the Mayweather construct, right, of the WBC being the more prestigious belt than the other ones, just because Mayweather told you, fine. If you want to believe that if you have a loss, you're not a good fighter, fine. If you want to believe that it's you're only going to fight people who come on the network that you have a deal with, fine. People criticize about how promoters didn't work with each other. Once again, that was another Mayweather construct because when he was in the position, right, of being the number one earner in the sport, he set that precedent where if you want to fight me, you have to come to my network. That was a Mayweather construct, right? That's what it was, So if you want to adopt the Mayweather way of thinking, and you want to be influenced by Mayweather, and you want to be one of these new age boxing fans, that's fine. I'm here to tell you, I'm just different. I'm just different. This isn't the boxing that I know. And you could say, oh, fighters are different today, things are different today. Yes and no. Yes and no. Right? You have throwback fighters today. You have fighters that don't need the belts. You have fighters that have held certain titles and not held others and still have been successful. It's not a prerequisite that you have to hold the WBC belt in order to be the best fighter in the division, right? So it is what it is. I'm not here to try to change your mind. You want to, if you think that the W, if you watch if you're a fan and you're watching a fight, and the main reason why you're watching a fight is because the WBC title's on the line, then go ahead and be a fan of Rolly Romero. Go ahead and be a fan of Mario Barrios. Go ahead and be a fan of Ryan Garcia. That's fine. If a requirement for a fight being a big fight to you is whether or not the WBC title is on the line, then that's fine. We're on. We have different opinions. We have different outlooks here. I don't need the WBC title. So when Artur Beterbiev and Dmitry Bivol rematch, it's not going to matter to me that the WBC title won't be on the line, because to me, whoever wins that fight will be the best fighter in the division. When Teofimo Lopez fights Shakur Stevenson and they're fighting for the WBO title and the ring title, and the WBC title is not on the line, the winner of that fight, to me, will still be the best fighter at 140. Right? So if you need the WBC belt to be on the line in order for you to think a fight is big, okay, that's fine. That's your choice. I think Teofimo Lopez and Shakur Stevenson are going to do just fine without the WBC belt being on the line. From what I'm hearing, right? They're making $10 million apiece. So again, like if you want to believe and fall and you want to subscribe to all of these Mayweather constructs and these Mayweather theories, and you want to fall for the marketing schemes, look, it's up to you, man. That's totally up to you. But all of this WBC being the most prestigious belt started with Floyd Mayweather. That's where it came from, right? And now we'll see where it goes. Jake Paul's fighting Anthony Joshua. From what I'm hearing, these guys are going to be making, again, I don't know, I'm just saying what the reported purses are. I'm hearing 40 million, 30 million. It's all going to happen without the WBC, right? So you figure it out yourself. You figure it out yourself. If you need the WBC belt to be on the line in order for you to want to watch a fight, then go ahead. All the power to you. I'm not going to argue with you. I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to tell you what your favorite fights should be, and I'm going to tell you how to spend your time and how to spend your money. Do what you want to do. I don't give a shit. I'm just telling you how I look at it. If I'm the WBC, think of it this way, and I'll bring it. I'm going to bring it back to this. I didn't want to go here because I kind of wanted to put this to bed, but I'm going to look at it from a logical standpoint. If you tell me to either take $150,000 and have the best fighter in the division, best fighter arguably in the world, one of the best fighters of his, probably arguably the best fighter in the era. If you were to tell me take $150,000 in order to have that guy represent me, I'm taking the $150,000. Now the alternative to that would be take $0,000 and now put the belt on somebody significantly less than that. So to me, my argument, I don't care about if you want to bring principles. You want to bring principles into a sport that has no principles. That's if you want to do that, that's fine. But my argument was, I just thought it was stupid because you allow the guy to hold your title for for 3 years without taking it off him, right? And now you had a guy for 2 months, and now you wanted to take it off him. And now instead of taking $150,000 like everyone else took, now you take $0,000, and now you don't have the best guy in the division, the best guy, the number one guy, pound for pound, number one guy in the sport. He doesn't have your belt anymore. So, in the grand scheme of things, who really loses here? Because the WBC had this all or nothing mentality where either you give me $300,000 or bust, right? Where they could have taken $150,000 and they wouldn't have had to strip him. So they acted so quickly here, it took them less than 2 months to strip Crawford, but they didn't strip Canelo ever, for not fighting the man. They never ordered the mandatory, and they didn't strip Canelo. They didn't strip Charlo. They didn't strip the other Charlo brother. So I guess it's hard to feel sorry for the WBC and see the WBC side of it when they've applied their rules so inconsistently, and they never follow their own rules consistently, and they didn't even follow their own rules here because he was so busy worrying about his hotel suite. He was so busy about worrying about where he was going to sit. He was so busy worrying about how many tickets he was going to get before the fight. He was so busy worrying about coming into the ring and putting the belt around his waist that he didn't really focus on the sanctioning fee, right? And generally, that money gets put up by the promoter before the fight, and it's taken out of the fighter's check after the fight, right? So, and then people say, well, this never happened before. Sure, it happened before. It happened with Floyd Mayweather when he fought Manny Pacquiao. He owed the WBO in 2015 $200,000. He fought for the WBO title, and I'm sure the promoter said to him, they want $200,000. Are you going to authorize me to deduct this from your purse? And he said no. Just like anything else, when you fill out your forms when you start a job, you have to sign away what your deductions are going to be. You have to claim, well, I'm going to claim 1, I'm going to claim 2, I'm going to claim 0. Do I want to get additional life insurance? Do I want health insurance? So you have to sign all these papers, your I-9, your W-4, all these things in order to authorize your employer to make these deductions. And that's what Crawford was supposed to do before the fight. And the WBC didn't ensure that he did that. So it is what it is. I mean, I'm sure Crawford said to himself, I'm assuming these guys are going to accept the same amount of money I'm paying the other 3. That's all. So that's my stance on that. I don't. We can say whatever that. I mean, it could be framed however you want to frame it, but that's just the way I look at it. All I'm saying is if I was a WBC, I probably would have took the $150K because you're already getting $300,000 from the other guy. So you want, instead of just taking the $450,000, right? You wanted $600,000, and now it looks like they may have a rematch. Now you're going to lose out on a sanctioning fee. So my whole argument was I just thought it was bad business, and I thought it was inconsistent behavior. I just thought it was stupidity on the WBC's belt. All I'm telling you is if it was me and I was Mauricio Sulaiman, I'm looking at it like this. Do I take the $150,000 like the other ones did and have the best fighter in the world represent my organization? Right? Or do I take 0? And to be honest with you, I'm not even going to rule out that this whole thing wasn't orchestrated by Terence Crawford and the TKO. Because do you find it a coincidence that Nick Khan was talking about this and made a point to talk about this in interviews? Mark Shapiro was at congressional hearings and he was talking about this, right? So I wouldn't be surprised if this was this somewhat orchestrated to some degree, but I don't even know because I still think that the WBC should have took the lesser amount. That's all I'm saying. Because now you have nothing, right? You have nothing. So now your belt is vacant. Now when the rematch, it looks like the rematch is going to happen now. Canelo wants it. He's saying that's the only, like, what other fight makes sense to Canelo right now from a financial standpoint? He's probably going to want to cash out. So in my opinion, what Canelo is probably going to do, he's probably going to go for this rematch, win, lose, or draw, and he's going to look for a fight with Jake Paul. That's what I think. He's got two. I think he's got two more fights left. To be honest with you, I think what the next fight he's going to push for is Crawford, because there's not a bigger money fight out there than Crawford, right? And then he's probably going to go for like one of those big, go for a money grab like Anthony Joshua is doing with Jake Paul. And if Jake Paul gets knocked out by Anthony Joshua, so what? Doesn't matter. He can still fight. He's fighting a smaller guy in Canelo. It's a more even matchup than if you would have asked me who does Jake Paul have a better shot at, Canelo Alvarez or Anthony Joshua, I'm gonna say Canelo Alvarez. And if Canelo Alvarez is coming off of another loss, he's older, he's on the way out, then the playing field is level. So I'm a businessman. I look at everything through the lens of a businessman, and that's why I just think the WBC was stupid, right? Because now, like, you Crawford ended up winning, and you ended up losing. What do you? So by stripping him, what do you actually gain? You get no money now. You get $0. You could have got $150,000 like the other guys did, but now you're getting nothing, right? So, and now you don't have, now the title's vacant, and now we're even hearing that Shiraz may fight somebody else and not fight for the vacant title. Let me pull this up. I was reading this the other day, right? And I guess it was like Shiraz may fight what's the guy? I can't believe I'm drawing a blank here. Jesus Christ. See if I can pull this up. Yeah, I'm reading it right here on Ring Magazine. Sources have informed the Ring Riyadh season that Diego Pacheco. Sorry about that. I drew a blank. Yeah, right here. Hamza Shiraz versus Diego Pacheco is being targeted for February 2026. Right there. So what happened to this? What happened to this fucking this vacant title between Shiraz and Mbili? So all I'm saying is that you thought it was just, I don't care. I'm a businessman. I don't give a fuck about morals and principles and all's fair in love and war, man. I'm a competitor, man. I'll fucking I'll fucking gouge your eyes out if I have to win. I don't care. Like I'm not this. I don't have this fucking Sally Struthers fucking Hamlet type fucking viewpoint towards things. I'm not a nice guy. Nice guys finish last. I'm not a nice guy, right? I don't. If you want to operate through the lens of being a nice guy, then keep taking L's. I think Mauricio Suleiman just took an L. That's all I'm saying, and I think he's an idiot for taking the L. That's all I'm saying. Guy's an idiot. He took an L. So now Turki Al Sheikh is going to say, nah, fuck you. Shiraz isn't going to fight for your vacant title. He's going to fight Pacheco now. That's what he's going to have him do, right? And guess what's going to happen? Guess what's going to happen? Guess what's going to happen? How fucking much do you want to bet that Mauricio Suleiman turns the tables and says, you know what? When Canelo fights Crawford again, guess what? Since Shiraz turned down the title shot, we're going to have Canelo and Crawford fight for the vacant belt. See? So again, this guy's a fraud. He's a fraud. If I bet you it plays out that way. He's going to turn around and say, guess what? Since Shiraz turned down the shot at the vacant title, guess what we're going to do now? We're going to have Canelo and Crawford fight for the vacant title. Right? Just like the IBF, when they stripped Canelo, it was they put it on fucking the other fucking guy's name. I can't remember the fucking guy. Jesus, I'm drawing blanks here. Right? And then they fought for it again. You know? Drawing all types of blanks here. You know? And then they stripped then when they stripped Usyk, right? Then he fought Dubois and he became undisputed again. Right? William Skull. I can't believe I forgot that guy's name. So here's the thing. You know, and then people say, "Oh, undisputed is this? It markets the fighter this and that." Yeah, okay, but every time someone comes undisputed, almost immediately they're vacating at least one of the belts. So attaining undisputed is a great accomplishment. It's a great accomplishment, but keeping all of them and defending it is a different thing because no one wants to pay all those sanctioning fees. Right? No one wants to pay all those sanctioning fees. So yeah, people win. It's a great accomplishment being undisputed, but almost always after attaining that goal, at least one of the belts becomes vacant. So it is what it is. Everyone is going to look at Terence Crawford as the best fighter. And doesn't matter that he doesn't have the WBC belt, at least to him and most others. So, yeah. I dropped the link to anyone on here. If you're in the comment section and you're sitting there trying, criticizing all my points, but you don't jump on and actually debate me on it, then I mean, what am I supposed to do? At some point, I just start ignoring your comments. If you have so much to say, you're just dropping, comments here and there, and you're not really articulating any points, and you're not really refuting my points. You're just making a contrary statement, or you're just making a critical statement about what I'm saying. Then how serious am I supposed to take you? That's the way I look at it. I dropped the links several times here. No one wants to jump on and have a discussion about it. So it is what it is. You don't even have to turn your camera on. You can come on and just talk. But it is what it is. All right, guys. I think that's about it. There's not much more I got here. But make sure you guys check out the Ringside Reporter podcast. Tonight at 6 p.m. Eastern time. Myself, Eric Lauder, and we'll talk about this Pacheco fight. I don't want to talk too much about it now because I want to save it for tonight. But yeah, we'll talk about it tonight. And until next time, Beeb is out. Talk to y'all soon. Peace out.